It is 12 p.m. and we're gonna get started. But first, welcome everyone taking the time to meet with us. So I'm gonna do a brief introduction of Dr. Martins, and it's a very brief considering that her CV is about 33 pages long. So, uh, so yes, my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jennifer Martin. She's an associate professor in the School of Education. Her work examines the intersections of race, ethnicity, class, and gender within educational theory and practice. Dr. Martin earned a PhD in education from Oakland University, where she focused on peer sexual harassment and its impact on school culture. She also holds a master's degree in English and liberal studies, as well as an educational specialist degree in administration and leadership. Dr. Martin's expertise lies in the areas of cultural responsible teaching and leading, educational quality, teacher education, curriculum theory, English education and literacy, urban education, so a long list. She has been recognized with numerous honors, including the Paulo Silver Case Award, recognition from the ARA division for her book on racial battle fatigue. And also, she got the Berman Award for the Sabbatical, the 23-24. So, long list of publications in various journals, such as the Journals of Cases in Educational Leadership, the Educational Forum, and Women's Studies International Forum. So it is a pleasure to have Dr. Martin with us. Please join me in welcoming her to, and we look forward to learning more about your research.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm more nervous doing this in front of you than I am at like conferences. Anyhow, so this presentation, W4W, I'll explain what that means momentarily. Educational Trauma and Finding Joy in School is my title, and this presentation is an amalgamation of everything I did leading up to and including my sabbatical semester. It is not one thing, it is many things. It does not represent one line of inquiry, but many, not one methodology, but many. In my field, teacher education or teaching in general, one must be aware of and attend to a million things at once. It's been said that teachers make about 1,500 decisions in a day, and that's about 3 decisions per minute. So multitasking is kind of my thing. So here we go. My background, I define my teaching, scholarship, and service under the umbrella of Freirean literacy. Teaching to those facing literacy challenge is of paramount importance to me, as in preparing pre-service teachers to do the same. However, literacy is more than just the ability to decode words and make meaning from their pairing. According to Freire, literacy is the ability to read the world. Thus, it is my charge to not only assist my students to understand the word, but also the world, and to work to make necessary changes to improve it. As a critical pedagogue and scholar, I am deeply committed through my teaching, scholarship, and service to issues of educational equity and justice in various forms. And this slide represents me and my people. So what kind of students am I most concerned about? My background is in alternative education. I spent 17 years at an alternative high school for students labeled at risk for school failure in Metro Detroit. And these were students who were removed from traditional schools because of behavior, quote unquote, or issues of attendance. So for the majority of my career, I've been interested in how students learn or how they refuse, how students learn and why sometimes they resist learning. I'm also troubled when the students who need the most innovative approaches to learning are often sequestered into the most punitive learning environment. So this was my sabbatical application. My original title was Stitches of Survival, Writing for a Reckoning. So I wanted to study the issue of educational trauma, and I wanted to do that through writing memoir. So originally, I wanted to work in a juvenile detention facility with young women to teach and study and write memoir for the purpose of uncovering and dismantling issues of educational and other forms of trauma. However, please get a cookie.
Thank you.
Yeah. However, I ended up working with a group of ninth grade students at the alternative school in Springfield. And that was a mix of young women. So there were 3 components to my plan: a learning component, a teaching component, and a research. I plan to write my own memoir, focusing on my own issues of educational trauma and how I healed and survived from them. And I hope that sharing my own story would help the students I was working with write their own memoir, and I shared my journey to healing. I also, during this time, applied for and was accepted to a writer's residency in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, which I'll talk about momentarily, but I highly recommend if you can do a writing residency. It's amazing. So these are some of the books I read or reread to prepare for sabbatical. And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free anytime. And folks on Zoom, please just shout out if you have a question as we go. So these are some relevant concepts and theoretical frameworks that I utilized in my work. And you may or may not be familiar with these. These are kind of solidly situated in teacher ed. Curriculum punishment, fugitivity, educational trauma, and the concept of not learning. So curriculum punishment, as defined by Milner, describes a situation where students are essentially punished by not being exposed to educational content that could be transformative and racially just. And this essentially denies them the potential to learn about and understand diverse perspectives and experiences, particularly regarding race and social justice. And this punishment can result in educational trauma. So some students are effectively punished by their school's curriculum. This concept also relates to Elliot Eisner's concepts of the hidden curriculum and the null curriculum. If you're not familiar, the hidden curriculum represents the implicit or explicit messages resulting from the curriculum chosen within a classroom or school. The null curriculum refers to curriculum that is intentionally or unintentionally ignored, dismissed, left out, which also speaks volumes to students. Students can be traumatized or harmed when representation is lacking or when representation is shown through deficit lenses. Next, the concept of fugitivity. It's defined as schooling that does not reflect, support, or embrace students and effectively dehumanizes, demonizes, and diminishes them. Hegemonic characterizations of said disengagement, disrespect, discipline issues, truancy may be perceived as delinquency and thus highly problematic. However, this leaving, this fugitivity, may be an attempt to save the self that the school neither values nor respects. Fugitivity represents a flight toward freedom and a desire to maintain one's humanity. We must reframe fugitivity and work to create more equitable schools for our students. Educational trauma. This definition to the left was written for a ninth grade audience who may have gaps in their literacy education. Such gaps can result from fugitivity, protecting the self when school is a place of harm or erasure. So educational trauma means going through difficult, scary, upsetting experiences that make you feel unsafe, disconnected, and hard to learn. Things like bullying, discrimination, violence, or other stressors. Educational trauma, according to Olson, may cause the following wounds: wounds of creativity, compliance, rebellion, numbness, underestimation, perfectionism, and wounds of the average. And then finally, the concept of not learning, devised by Herbert Cole. And this concept refers to how students, whether consciously or not, may resist learning from a teacher who they perceive as not respecting their identity, their language, their culture, their gender, their sexuality, their race, etc. I read this book in 2012. When I first read it, I unearthed a memory of not learning myself in 7th grade, and I still have a geographical block. I cannot get anywhere without GPS. Don't give me a map. I'm not going to do it. And it's because I was traumatized by a teacher who taught geography. And I've used this book and some of the concepts within in professional development sessions with teachers. And when they kind of go back in their educational histories, they also remember, you know what? I had a traumatizing experience, and now I have a block with regard to that particular concept. Hence my geography block. My goal is to prevent teachers from causing instances of not learning and to help unearth the causes of not learning and to alternative paths to address the wound and the resulting gaps. So I wonder in education, where is the joy? Why is it authoritarian, hierarchical, compliance-based, and punitive when it should be more like egalitarian, collaborative, participatory, exploratory, and forgiving? And the students I am typically drawn to, alternative ed students, are often sent to the most punitive and authoritarian environments, which can contribute to their being funneled into the prison pipeline. This is also true of urban schools. So what else did I do to prepare for sabbatical? Segue. As part of my preparation, I completed a master class on memoir writing with Dr. Roxane Gay. If you're not familiar with her work, she's a genius. Buy all her books, watch her TED Talks, do all the things. So what I learned from the course on writing and overcoming writer's block, she asks, what is your why? Can you refine it? Hone in on your why. What can you bring to it? Start from the personal, get it out. You can edit it later. Are you hitting a roadblock? Write for another project. Are you blocked? Ask yourself, are you missing the joy? Can you force your way through it? Go do something else. Engage with some other arts. Do you have a nemesis? Roxane has 10. That made me feel a lot better. So Roxane Gay, her advice, she writes every day. And to give us hope, she says there are 3,000 small presses in the world. Try one. Okay, so again, preparing for sabbatical. I met with the teacher and students at Douglas prior to my sabbatical semester to get the tone of the classroom, to learn about the teacher and the students, and to brainstorm for our goals for the following semester. I had an amazing student intern who found me. She was Dr. Gupta's student in business, and she helped me a lot with marketing and design, and this is her creation. Her name was Alex. So in communicating with the teacher, before I actually was working during my sabbatical with the students, I was trying to devise with them a name for our group and a logo, and the kids were like, just let her do it herself. But she can decide on the name and the title. And I waited a few days. And then later on, they indeed came up with the brilliant W4W, word for word, and this logo. They wanted a graffiti logo. And the great Alex helped me with just raising awareness about our group. And I did an interest survey with the kids before the semester started. So during spring semester of 2024, I created and engaged in a memoir writing class at Douglas Alternative, which included reading memoir, writing memoir, yoga, and social emotional learning. So I ended up doing about 24 sessions. I was going once a week, and then I was like, this is not enough time. I need to go twice a week. So we ramped it up. Each W4W member composed their own book of their writings, including their memoir, their poetry, photos, graphics, which I had printed for them. And I also created a little compilation book, which I will pass around, for the teacher, for the administrators, at Douglas and for some district level administrators. So segue again, this is Deary Hollow Writer's Residency in Eureka Springs. That was the very room where I sat and wrote. It was beautiful. I highly recommend. That was my own little private balcony. I have tried to create a similar setup in my own house. Not as nice. But this is the Dupps Den Writer's Suite, and it was named to honor Cynthia and Kirk Dupps, who were major contributors to the interior renovation of a mid-century building. So it was a mid-century modern house, and it had different little suites, all named after writers. And amazing. So during this residency, I worked on my memoir, and I completed about 250 pages. Are they good pages? No, but there are 250 pages. I'm still working on it. Again, if you have the opportunity to do a writer's residency, I highly, highly recommend. So with my Berman Award, thank you. I was fortunate enough to be able to help the school. I purchased books for the teacher to supplement her classroom library. She selected those texts. I also was able to purchase from a Black-owned bookstore, my former student, 8 unique class sets of different memoir texts. And we ended up using 4 mentor texts based upon student interest. Now, remember when I said punitive environments? So at the school, for the lunch program, they have one choice of lunch. So if you don't like it, you're not eating. So I'm like, okay, no. And you're not allowed to have water. You see, I drink water like every 3 seconds. So I was like, okay, we're not doing that. So we got permission to have water when I was there, and I would bring them homemade stuff. See those pretzels there? I made those. Those are homemade. These cookies, they're called Rockstar cookies. I hope you enjoy them. I would love your feedback. But anyway, every time, so there's a lack of choice, a lack of autonomy for the kids. And, you know, I asked them to tell me what they wanted, and I tried to, you know, do that. Again, punitive environment, school uniforms, khakis and a polo, khakis and a polo. That's all they could wear. So I stood in solidarity with them, and I had my own little uniform. However, we had shirts. That's a W4W shirt, and the kids were allowed to wear those on the days that we did the group. So they also got UIS water bottles. Thank you, UIS marketing team. We made W4W journals, pens, and water bottles, t-shirt stickers with our logos. I also bought them 55 bazillion journals from the dollar store. They have great journals, highly recommend. Am I opposed to school uniforms? Yes, politically, aesthetically, and economically. If you think it prevents bullying, it's just a Band-Aid, but that's another presentation. Okay, so the curriculum. In terms of the curriculum, we read memoir, we wrote memoir. I shared my own writing with the students, not all of it, of course, the appropriate parts. We did an SEL workshop, we did reading exercises, and eventually they came to trust me, and we did some yoga together as well. So I created short weekly writing exercises centering on various topics. For example, one day we just focused on theme. One day we just focused on symbolism. One day we just focused on stereotype. What stereotypes have been placed upon you? And we also started out with some poetry. Again, I shared my writing, and we read mentor texts aloud and discussed that. So let's get to the good stuff. These were the 4 primary texts that we use. The first one we started with is I Can't Keep My Own Secrets, written by teens, and it's all 6-word memoirs, and it's amazing. And that's kind of the base of our curriculum. And then the students wrote their own 6-word memoirs and then expanded. The second book that we read was called Work With What You Got. It's a memoir, and it details the story of Zion Clark, who was born without legs, and it details his journey through the foster care system to high school wrestling champion and wheelchair racer to activist. The third book we read was Family Style. It's a graphic novel memoir of a Vietnamese immigrant boy's search for belonging in America. And then finally, Maybe an Artist, which is a graphic novel memoir revealing the challenges of being a teen with dyslexia and using art as a way to communicate. The author's cartoons were eventually published by the New York Times. And so a lot of the students, as you may have gleaned from my previous talking points, some are resistant to learning for a lot of very valid reasons. And I have a lot of experience with working with resistant learners. So we started out with very low stakes writing pieces, such as a 6-word memoir, such as Where I'm From poems. And these little pieces became bigger building blocks for longer memoirs. And these pictures are the final products of their book, the books that they made, which I had printed for them. I just redacted their names with those hideous little rectangles. And this is our group. Not everyone was always there. And some students were not able to finish the semester, but you got to work with what you got. Segue again. During my sabbatical semester, I also took the opportunity to complete a 200-hour yoga and SEL training program. This was online and via Zoom. I became certified in June of 2024, but I was able to practice the techniques I was learning with the students at Douglas. And I took the lead from the students. I invited them to engage in certain practices, but if they were not interested, that was fine. Choice is important. So for example, one woman, this is not her real name, but I called her Miss Noble because that's what her name meant. And she was like, nope. And she was often the only girl. Not always, but often. She's like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'll just watch. And I was like, cool, I totally respect your boundaries. Thank you for having boundaries. That's amazing. But then one day she was like, can we do yoga? And I'm like, yes. Yes, we can. So as part of my yoga SEL teacher training, Miss Noble is the one taking pictures because she was like, no, not doing that. I'm like, cool. I was tasked with creating and delivering a social emotional learning workshop, and the students at Douglas agreed to indulge me. They gave me great feedback as well. So this is us doing this stability. If you're familiar with tree pose, you know, this one we do it as a group and then we let go, and the group is stronger than the individual, corny as it may sound. It was amazing. And then this is an appreciation station. So imagine we're all like on our mat, seated in a circle, and we're doing different exercises. And this is just one example. So everybody has a Post-it note with their name on the top, and then the Post-it notes get passed around, and everybody writes a positive comment or attribute of that person, and it's really fun. And my favorite is that I'm fun and cool. Coming from a 15-year-old, how better can that be? Okay, in terms of final product, I created a template in Canva, and students were then able to plug in their writing, pictures, images. However, some people didn't like my template and they're like, I want to do something else. I'm like, cool, that's awesome. So many of them became like a collage, an art piece. I then had them printed, and the students were so pumped. And then these are just a couple of examples. I'm just going to pause here. You can read. And these are from 2 different students. Emily, look at me when you're done reading. So I know. Thank you. All right, so now moving on to the research component. As far as the research goes, I created a Qualtrics survey kind of around different issues that fall under the umbrella of educational trauma. A focus group, I took my own field notes, and then I used artifacts that the students created. In terms of the survey, there were 55 questions asking students to report on a variety of experiences that could lead to educational trauma. For example, 23 of those questions were open-ended questions asking students to explain their experiences. Students were cautioned to only answer those questions they felt comfortable answering. So this is just, I kind of followed the same framework for all the different subcategories falling under educational trauma. So this is just about bullying. Just as an example of what the survey looked like. Did I have a small n? Yes, I did. But you can still find wisdom in a small n. So 75% of our friends experienced bullying in schools, weekly and monthly. 75% did not report it. And that was really interesting to me. Like, why? Why didn't they? The ones who did report, did it fix it? Either no or unsure. The reporting never assisted them, which is highly problematic to me. 75%, and each of these concepts were defined within the survey in case students didn't know, exactly what they pertain to. So 75 experienced harassment, 100% online harassment, and daily, 33, monthly, 67, a lot. Now in this case, 100% reported harassment, 67 indicated that it did not fix the issue. And then why do you think that's the case? These were two comments that I got. 67% reported experiencing violence in school. Daily, 33%. So 2/3 experience violence quite frequently. 100% reported being treated unfairly by teachers and staff. Okay, this one's highly problematic, fourth bullet. None felt respected by teachers, none. All of them felt they were treated unfairly. There's a lot of stress related to schoolwork. 67% felt stress or anxiety. Yeah.
When did you give them the survey? Was it before they started working with you a lot, or like after they got to know you safe? When
They took it toward the end of our experience, but they were reporting on Douglas, not on us.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. 67 felt traumatized by school. And this quote pertains to that stat. They don't deal with the violence the way I think they should. They felt a little more supported by counselors than by teachers. Now, again, I don't want to say take this with a grain of salt, but these are students who are already traumatized by school. Okay. So just keep that in mind, because I think a lot of great things are going on at Douglas, and I don't want to say these teachers are bad, because they're not. They're great. Okay, at the end of the experience, our very last day, I conducted a focus group with the students. Did we also have McDonald's that day? Yep, because that's what they wanted for our celebration. And when you do a big project, you always need to celebrate. So did I get the McDonald's? Yes. Did I eat it too? Okay, so the focus group, we're breaking up the transcript into themes. And so in terms of connection to school and teachers, there were some very positive connections reported. However, some felt students really liked doing the book. That was like their favorite thing. But there was a broader sense of disengagement from school. In terms of their perceptions of the school environment, the social aspect was really important to students. But the negative aspects, one student talked about how he likened the school to a prison. The way it, not only the policies within it, but the architecture and structure on the outside and the fence. And the security guards and the police. I'm saying that for myself, like when I walk into the school and there's a metal detector. and there's a person with a gun, I don't love it. No, I hate it. Okay, so, in terms of the importance of school, that really varied. Some saw it just as a means to an end, as opposed to like a safe place that's fun and engaging. Challenges in school. Some students felt a lot of peer pressure and that it was overwhelming. So alternative schools oftentimes tend to be smaller. So for example, the school where I was at for 17 years, I was the only English teacher. So if they hate you, they got nowhere to go. And that's the case here too. So if a student didn't like a particular teacher, they might have that teacher 2-3 times a day. So desire for improvement, students desired more engaging group activities, hands-on projects, and rewards. And also they did acknowledge that their attitudes had changed since they were at the school and they felt more positive about school. Social dynamics and favoritism. Some felt that favoritism existed in the school. And students sometimes reported that they go to school for gym time. They do get a little bit of gym time. It's not an organized PE class, but just like basketball. And socializing. And there was a desire for more extracurricular activities and hobbies. They cited boxing, wrestling, having pets at school. And then finally, they talked about the need for more mental health awareness, mental health checks, and additional supports. So here's my little summary. So what I gleaned was there was a need for more personalized support, more engaging activities, and an environment that fosters more positive connections and mental well-being. And here are just some quotations, direct quotations from the focus group. So Ms. Noble said, "I don't feel connected at school at all." And then the two, I asked them, "Do you remember when you felt particularly connected to a book or an assignment?" And 2 different students said, "This book that we're doing right now." So that was awesome. And then what makes you want to come to school or not? Some cite learning, some cite friends. And then we have, this is the prison quotation. So maybe pause to read that. It's pretty telling. Actually, I'm gonna read it out loud. "Why I don't want to come to school, it's terrible. It's a prison most times." So if you look at the architecture of this building on the outside, you'll notice that there's a huge tower over there that looks like a guard tower. And outside, there's a fence that goes all the way around the building. And then the soccer goals out there that make it look like we play soccer. We never play soccer. And again, more quotations. What makes you excited to come to school? What challenges you most? And what helps you learn? At the end of the focus group, I asked them if they had questions for me. And they said, "Did you like the group?" I said, "I love the group. It was my joy every day." And they were like, "No." I'm like, "Mm-hmm." Okay, and then, so I had 30 pages of field notes. So when I would come home from the day at the school and just note. And so I wanted to do a little experiment. So in addition to the previously mentioned sources of data, I also kept field notes and I conducted an experiment. I put all of my field notes through Microsoft Copilot, which does protect your data, I am told. Talk to Emily. Okay, so nothing too earth-shattering, groundbreaking here, but what was interesting to me is AI talked about me, and if I was analyzing my own field notes, I never would have brought myself into the equation. You know what I mean? I would have just talked about the students. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I just highlighted like these little notes that pertain to me, and I was like, that's so interesting. I never would have thought to include myself in the equation of the analysis. That's interesting. Okay, moving forward. Service to the community. So I have been, since I got certified in yoga, I was like, actually, the principal of Hazel Dell, I also volunteer there, said, I used to do a writing group there. She's like, will you do something with us after school for the Boys and Girls Club? And I was like, well, I just got certified in yoga. So this is what we did. Was it chaos? Yes, it was in the gym with 10 trillion kids and then just like my couple, right? And so we're trying to do yoga and there's like, but we got
And
some.
that gym is so noisy.
Yes, it is. It's not Zen, okay? But anyway, super fun. And then the Boys and Girls Club, they got to talking there, and the director at Franklin was like, will you come here too? And I was like, okay. So very different experience from teaching wait, let me show you my smallest one here, kindergarten. Okay. And then middle school, I know, right? Very talented, very talented. But so that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Do you have any questions? And that's what I got. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, I was just struck when you were talking at the very beginning, Jennifer, about corporal punishment. I was thinking about our current climate and what's gonna happen.
Is this being recorded?
We can stop that record. Tell, Carissa that
Those people who need to be subversive need to be subversive now. Those people who are safe and brave enough to be loud need to be loud now.
So, Dan, I'm curious about when your students reporting. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to work all the buttons here today. I'm wondering how far back they trace their kind of feelings of not being respected, not feeling able, feeling like they can't learn, that the teachers don't listen to them, and respect them. As you know, I worked before here for many years in special ed and had my other experiences with this, but I'm curious how far back these students, did they talk about how far back they trace this?
Donna, that is a great question for my next analysis. I honestly I did not try to trace their wound. I
I'm
felt like
if they
asking.
did it spontaneously. I mean,
Yeah.
they were talking about the present, right? So their experience at that site where you were. And I'm just wondering if any of them had sort of went beyond that.
No, they really didn't. One student had engaged in something that was uncharacteristic of him, and so he got sent there. And he had more positive experiences to report than negative. But other than that, I really didn't go historically back in time with them. But
Yeah,
I
curious to know. I mean, I mean, I imagine that this took years to build up because these students are remind me again of their age range or their,
they're in ninth grade, so 14, 15.
okay.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Donna. Thank you.
This is wonderful, by the way, and I loved the pictures of the kids doing yoga. That's just so awesome.
Thank you. I loved them too. I had to show somebody. Thank you.
So cute. I loved it.
Well, let's go back there. You don't got to look at a picture of me. Let's go there. Okay. Who does? Eric?
Yeah, hi. So is it still going on? Are you
Yeah.
working at one of the schools?
Yeah, I'm still, well, so I did Hazel Dell all fall, and then in February, they had a STEM initiative that was required of the after-school program. So I'm gonna start back there in the fall, but I'm still doing Franklin Middle School. So I'll just point out this superstar here. When I first went to Franklin, I was like, I know you. And she was in my little writers poetry group at Hazel Dell, like pre-COVID. So that was really cool. So yeah, I'm still doing it.
So I have
Wanna
kind of
come?
a
Eric, you
question
wanna
of,
come?
yeah, probably. You know, for like 5 or 6 years, I was working there as a volunteer after school at Franklin, one or two. And that's what my question is. As a faculty at UIS, I kind of justified that as kind of like professional time because I had students in social work lab that had to do a certain number of hours of service in the community, and I often had them as volunteers. And also, I figured, well, I study adolescent and child mental health and social work, so if I'm spending a couple hours a week, but designing the curriculum and rounding up the volunteers and debriefing after every event and just consistently appearing for, and I did it for like 5 years, 10 semesters. Um, it takes a lot of time, and I wonder but like you say, it's your joy. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes after school programs, it also can be crushing. With some things you witness and hear from the kids. How do you incorporate that into your life as a UIS faculty, and how do you think about it in terms of our career to have a significant time commitment, every afternoon, 2:30 to 4 at one of these schools?
Gosh, that's a great question that I don't know how to answer, Eric. Hold on a minute, let me think.
Is it part of our role as a professor at a public land grant based university to put a certain amount of time into, I mean, is it like if I was a business professor, maybe I'd be in Innovate Springfield in that incubator downtown, but I'm a social worker and you're a teacher ed professor. So do we belong in the schools a certain number of hours a week?
I feel like we should be. And so, well, I try to make everything sort of go together. So, I did this yoga thing to help with the kids at Douglas. And I didn't even talk about the breathing exercises that we did, which helped them. Let me just segue for a minute, Eric. So we did like dual nostril breathing, joyful breath, and one of the dual nostril breathing. One of the students said, so I taught them, I wanted them to have different tools in their toolkit. And one of the students said, I was really mad the other day and I did the dual nostril breathing and it really helped me calm down. And I was like, amazing, amazing. But I try to like parlay everything together. So then I was like, well, by the way, I have a Zoom yoga class on Mondays for free. All my yoga's free, by the way. So it's part of my service, Eric, right? And I count it as service to the community. But then also I worked with our new faculty member, Alex Wolf, and I met him through the new faculty mentoring. So he's in exercise science. And I was like, hey, do you want to do a white paper on yoga and the benefits of yoga? So we collaborated on that. And incidentally, there is I don't know if you heard about the new state law that took effect January 1st. State Senator Rachel Ventura about 20 minutes a week in addition to PE, having time for yoga or breathing or meditation. And so when I found out about that, like last November, I contacted the senator and I'm like, hey, I just got certified in yoga. If you ever want help or want to work together, like I'm your person. And so when Alex and I finished the white paper, I sent it to her. And so she used some of our stats in her social media campaign, raising awareness of the new law. And so like little stuff like that, Eric. So we're going to try to work together to do something else research wise around yoga and how yoga and exercise can impact learning. It can increase desire to learn and even academic achievement. But yeah, I get severe anxiety sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go do yoga. And but then when I get there and it's amazing. Now, is it always amazing? No, there's sometimes, kids, it can be stinky as well. It's all good. But when I leave, like they make me laugh. It's funny. They want to try new things, and it's worth it. Did that answer your question, Eric?
Oh yeah, I was glad to hear your thoughts on it, and I hope we keep these things going on sustainable. I'm starting something at Washington Middle School in March with some of my social work students, and it's always wonderful to work with the other students who are on campus that want to volunteer with high school or middle school kids. So maybe we can have like a group of faculty that are interested in helping out in District 186, like the 186 Club or something.
I would love that, Eric. Let's start it. Me and you.
All right. My
Yes.
office is right next door to yours, so.
Eric's office is right next door to mine. So yeah, I will be calling on you. And Eric, right now I do not have any students helping me, like teacher ed students, and that is my bad. I need to start trying to recruit people to.
My best volunteers were the
I
nursing
think-
students
I
from the
think
UIC
the
program on our
middle-
campus.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
The best volunteers I ever had were the nursing students from the UIC nursing program on our campus. They were good.
Wow. Nice. I think
All
the
right,
middle school students would love to have college students come as well.
Yep. Yeah, they would.
Thanks for the question, Eric. And I'm gonna be knocking on your door soon.
Thanks for this, Jennifer. It's really cool to hear about. I heard the tail end of you on the radio like 2 or 3 weeks ago. and yeah. I just happened to be in my car, and so I didn't hear much of the content, but I could, when you started talking about the breathing exercise just now, I was remembering that you were talking about that on, maybe it was Community Voices. I don't know
It was.
which show it was. Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I'd love to be involved in getting more in touch with 186 too. That's something that we've been talking about in my units, and I've reached out to the high school where my kiddo is at now, and so we're going to be doing some connections at the high school level. That's part of our plan. So that would be cool to get involved with you guys in that too.
Oh,
I also, just from what you were saying and your response, I and forgive my ignorance, but it might be great to bring some of this kind of lens to this campus as well. I mean, I know just from working with the environmental studies students, a lot of them are really scared about just the tenor of, because these are students who at the master's level, like they want public sector jobs, right? That's kind of like, that has been a real pipeline. And so they're so freaked out. And
should be.
and feeling unsafe and, but I think the kind of mixing in the idea of joy struck me as really important, and it kind of resonated with, just last night, actually, I have this blended format of our master's students, and part of my role in that is to kind of do a little bit of qualitative methods with them, because they get a ton of quantitative methods, which is very important. But I had them do like focus groups on, in which like half the class was the research subjects or participants for the other half's research projects. And in the past, I've kind of like spoon fed a little bit, or kind of bordered on spoon feeding with like, here's a topic, here's some starter questions, but I had more time this semester, so they developed their own. I had them develop their own topic and focus group questions and stuff. And one of the groups decided that they wanted to compare in-person and online learning. You can guess kind of what came out of that, given that it was like an on-ground, a group of local students. But they, in kind of pushing them to develop some kind of overarching, theory, like a grounded theory kind of approach. Basically, they ended up deciding that there was this trade-off. They recognized the efficiency gains for themselves in online, but found it to be a real trade-off with some of the benefits they got from on ground. And when they were kind of pressed to just really compress and summarize those benefits, they described the on ground experience as being just more full of joy. And so it's just kind of a nice reminder, I think, that you also gave us, that, that's kind of going along with like safety and that kind of, and addressing trauma, like to remember that education can be joyful. And that's, I think, such an important part of that lens that you just gave us, that I also think would be really nice to bring to working with students on our campus as they kind of go through their own kind of like present day trauma as young people in this society,
thanks for sharing that, Brandon. And I feel like my students also talk about a trade-off, because a lot of my the majority, okay, 100% right now, are online asynchronous.
Sure.
And they say they have families, many of them are like non-traditional students, and I'm doing it because it's more expedient, it's easier, it's works with my schedule, but I know that I'm missing that. Thank you for coming, Heather. I know I'm missing that face to face, and I would probably learn more if I had more opportunities for face to face.
My students couldn't figure out whether they thought they were learning more. They knew they didn't like the online, and again, bias sample of our local students, but
Yeah.
but they couldn't quite figure out. They kind of tried to get at like the rigor or quality of the learning, but they ended up kind of bouncing back to just like the emotional experience of being in person. You know, I think they didn't have a metric to say like I learned more in this or that text somehow. Which I thought was also kind of interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you. Lane.
So I was really curious if, when you talked about the, these students get sent to these schools because they've been struggling. Have you seen an example of schools that increase the humanity of them? I mean, I saw what you were doing, was doing that, because you said, because of that, they get more authoritarian. Well, if they can't deal with it with little laws, let's put lots of them on them, which sounds like it's just creating a downward spiral for students. Have you seen examples of ones that try to take them and say, how do we help them find some kind of joy in this, what they're doing?
That is a great question.
Sounds really hard to do, though, I think.
That is a
Especially
great
at
question.
scale.
Yeah. Small, like the school that I worked at for 100 years. I loved it so much. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, okay? I promise. But so when I started at the school, this is mid to late 90s, it was where the bad teachers were sent to die. Literally. Like if they wanted somebody to quit because they were a terrible teacher and like not good for kids, they would send them to Tinkham. I'll just say it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. So when I came, so before I came, I chose to go to this school because I had seen these students speak at a board meeting and I was like, these are my people, this is where I want to be. One teacher before lasted one day, one lasted 1 week because the kids would terrorize them because they've been terrorized. And you need to show that you're going to show up and be there no matter what every day as a clean slate. From there, we had just a very small staff who were really committed to being there and to that population. We had some money, which was really helpful, and a really caring administrator who supported us. And we did a lot of innovative things. We did a lot of service learning projects. We did a lot of field trips. I had a program. So a lot of my students had severe gaps in their literacy. And I did this 40-hour week-long Orton Gillingham multisensory learning reading training. And it demystified language for me. I was like, oh, okay, that's why you pronounce something like that? And I'm an English teacher. I have 2 English degrees at this point. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, got it. So I'm like, how can I teach this to my students without them murdering me? Because I'm not going to disrespect them by teaching them phonics, right? Because they're going to feel that way. So we created a program where I trained my students. I trained them everything I learned, and then they became reading tutors for elementary school students, thereby addressing all of those gaps in their life. So long answer to your question, these things are possible, but it's just like there are so many other mandates placed upon teachers and the testing, and this is all we care about. And now we're not going to teach social studies. We're not going to teach art, music, because we're not testing it. So all of these things are harmful, and I don't have an answer, I'm sorry. Lynn?
Hi, thank you for this. This was just fabulous. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks, Lynn.
And the joy angle is just filling me with joy. And what I wondered about with, you're doing this looking at educational trauma, which is a perspective that I'm glad to have to sort of encapsulate some of what I feel like I have been observing my whole career in college students, right? And I wonder And then your combination of reading and writing as a way to inject joy into the educational and like agency, I guess, into the educational experience. What would be your top 3 things that college instructors should be thinking about when in terms of pedagogy, I guess, when they feel like as this happens to me, I'll feel like, oh, something's going on here. Um, what are like tools that you as someone with this deep pedagogical experience related to youth would want to tell college teachers about?
That's a fantastic question, Lynn. And just off the top of my head, I'll give you an example of something I'm doing this semester, kind of for the first time. So right now, I have one grad class and one undergrad class that are completely asynchronous online. And so I'm always thinking about how I can make and build connections to my students when I'm never seeing them in person, typically. And so I did this playlist thing. So I'm like on a discussion board, what is your top 10 playlist? And if they're not into music, they can do other things. So what are your top 10 songs, or what are your top 10 podcasts, or your top 10 movies, or whatever? And you can do a combination of them. And then I did my top 10 songs. And so I had like a link to all of the things. And so everybody had to look at everybody's playlist and listen to one thing that they were not familiar. And I actually got some comments from students like, this is more than a playlist. This is a message. And I was like, I worked really hard on that. Thank you. So it was really fun and cool, and building connections and like letting students show who they are as people, because I think that's sometimes left out of classrooms, particularly in colleges, when, if you're lecture based, that's not the greatest pedagogy. I mean, there's certain things that you can do to enhance your lecture and make people feel more connected. I will say one more thing, and this can be done in person or asynchronously online. And I talk about this all the time, so if you've heard it before, I'm sorry. But you can do it through Canvas. So I have my students like 3 times a semester just do a little journal, and it's just 5 points. And it's like, tell me whatever you want to tell me. You can talk about the class, you can talk about your life, you can talk about whatever you want. And sometimes they write this much, and sometimes they write 1,000 pages. And my job is to, and Len knows about this, we try to hit the Rogerian constructs of empathy, genuineness, unconditional positive regard. So when I respond back to students, I try to relate to them in some way. I try to share a piece of myself in some way. And that really builds connection. And students are like, thank you for giving me this time to vent. I really, thank you for building relationships. This has really helped me to like get my feelings out, and stuff like that. And if you do teach in person, you could just do a little check-in on Canvas a couple times a semester and build connections there. That's my second. You said to name 3 things, Lynn, so I'm still working on it. And the third thing is try to find something funny. Try to laugh every class if you can. And if you don't find yourself funny, maybe ask somebody to tell a joke or share something. What's the last funny thing that you saw or that happened to you? That's what I got.
Fabulous, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. That was a great question. We got 2 minutes. Thank you for being here, everybody. This is super fun. I was so nervous.